Alrighty, looping. We, in our prior careers as students and programmers, already had the idea of looping. I don't think there's going to be a lot to surprise us in it, so we may not spend a huge amount of time in it. Of course, whenever I say that, I find more things to lecture about anyways. So our objectives: creating loops using the while, creating loops using the for, creating loops using do. While is a pretest loop, meaning that the test happens before it. For is a pretest loop. And do is what's known as a post-test. Yeah, you're not going to let me edit? Did I do something to not? Oh, well. No wonder it didn't save where I was. Using nested loops, accumulating totals with loops, understanding how to improve loop performance, and appreciate looping issues in GUI programs. So what is a loop? Just allows the execution of a block of code over and over. If you need to do something 17 times in a row, it's better to write a loop that'll do it rather than copy and paste your code 17 times. So the loop body is a block of statements within the looping structure. So you'll have a loop header, and then you'll have curly braces, and the loop body will be put inside the curly braces. And the loop body will execute as long as the conditional expression is true. So there's a Boolean expression up at the top, or if it's a do statement at the bottom. And if that's valid, it executes the body of the loop. And if it's not valid, it exits the loop. It doesn't run it. Just like an if statement would not run if you did not have a valid condition up at the top, if it was false. And every execution is called an iteration. So you'll talk about iterating through, iterate through the loop, or, the loop iterates, stepping through the loop. The while loop. You have a Boolean expression, and then the loop body executes if the expression is true. While I is less than 10. Well, if I is less than 10, it's going to execute the body. And then the while body is a statement that's underneath the header. So there'll be a while, and then inside parentheses there'll be a Boolean expression. Or if you feel like it, you can just make your expression the word true, in which case it becomes an infinite loop, unless there's a break statement in it. And then the loop body. So an infinite loop is one that never ends. A program with an infinite loop might eventually fail and end due to computer memory and hardware capacities. Right? If your loop is allocating memory and never releasing it, that'd be a problem. The program would run out of memory. Or if you're writing to a file, you could fill up the disk drive. It's harder to do anymore, but So to make a while loop end correctly, 3 separate actions should occur. This is your typical loop. You're going to initialize a loop control variable. You test it in the while expression, and then the body has to alter that eventually, or else it's an infinite loop. So for example, here's our while loop. While number is less than limit. So we initialize number to 1. We initialize limit to 5. While number is less than limit, well, 1 is less than 5. Then write hello, add 1 to number, and then it's reevaluated. So number equals 2. 2 is less than 5. It runs those two things again. 3 is less than 5. It runs those two things again. 4 is less than 5. It runs those two things again. 5 is less than 5. It runs those two things again. Now number is 6. 6 is not less than 5, so it exits the loop. Like that. Int number equals 1, constant limit is equal to 5, while number is less than limit, write hello and add 1 to number. Don't do this, and the quiz questions will probably show something like this. The body of the loop needs to be enclosed in braces if it's more than 1 line long. We've talked about this with if statements. If you put no curly braces there, but you indent multiple lines of code, it's not Python. It doesn't treat it as a body of the loop, all of it. Just the first statement is a body of the loop if there are no curly braces. So if we wrote our code like this, it means that this is the only statement that's inside the loop, the write hello. And then this statement, even though it is indented, it's after the loop, and so it'll never exit the loop because number will always remain less than limit and nothing ever updates the loop control variable. So an empty body is a loop with no statements. Easiest way to make an empty body is just to do this, and you're not going to want to do this. All right, while whatever x is less than 10, there, that's an empty body. Why do I mean it's an empty body? Because that's the same thing as writing this. So if this condition is true to begin with, it'll never become false, and the program will just run endlessly until it's terminated. So just like if statements, don't do that. Don't do, that. This is even worse in a way because the if statement just doesn't do anything, but just locks the program, goes into an infinite loop. So wouldn't want to do that. A for loop, right? For whatever, blah, 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 blah. You put a semicolon there, it breaks it. The only time you use a semicolon with a loop structure is if you have a do loop. The do loop looks different. It looks like this. And then it has a while condition. And then just to end the whole thing off, you got to put your semicolon there. But you don't put it there. Our rule still holds. Never put a semicolon in front of a curly brace. It would make a lot more sense to see that if we did something like this. If we put the curly brace on the line, the same line, console.out.write line, print something, right? Then it becomes real clear, right? That's not right. You can just tell it's not right. You'd fix it by doing that. And so the one drawback to doing the block brace placement is that it makes it real easy to ignore, to overlook the fact that you put a semicolon there. So just don't do it. So incrementing is adding 1 to the loop control variable. While x is less than 10, inside here we might put x plus plus. Change the value of x so eventually x will no longer be less than 10. So now it's not an infinite loop except for the fact that that is still there. So that's incrementing it. So typically what do you do? Initialize a loop variable. You set x equal to 1 or 0 or whatever you're going to start counting. And then you have your condition, your Boolean expression, while x is less than or equal to 10. And then you have your body. And inside the body, you have your update of the loop control variable. That's your typical loop. You can write loops that don't initialize a variable and that their condition is just the word true or whatever. But typically, that's your typical loop. So a definite loop is one that just goes through a series of values. You're going to count from 1 to 10. You're going to count from 1 to 1,000,000. You're going to open the file and read every line in the file. You have an array, and so you're going to step through the array. It's a definite loop. The computer knows how many times it's going to run. An indefinite loop is not based on arithmetic and not on a known series of data, but it'll keep running until the user decides to stop it or until some condition happens, right? In Pac-Man, you can gain lives and you can lose lives, but if you ever get to lives equals 0, it exits the game. Well, the loop that runs Pac-Man wouldn't know how many lives in advance there are going to be. It knows what you start with, but it doesn't know if you're going to win anymore or not, so that's not a definite loop. It's more of an indefinite loop. Or if you ask the user, enter a score or a -1 to quit, it doesn't know how many scores you're going to enter. And then a signal value is a value that can end a series of data. right? You might ask them if they want to continue. If they type in no, it's a sentinel value. If you say enter a score or -1 to quit, that -1 is a sentinel value. All right, do you want to see your balance? Read your line. Convert it to a character. Wonder why they convert it to a character rather than just grabbing the first letter of it. While the response is equal to y, we write their balance. And then we add something to the balance based on the interest rate. And then we ask them, do you want to see next year's balance? And then we read again. And then it'll keep repeating as long as they keep saying, yes, we want to see next year's balance. So this is what's known as a priming read right here. It's the first read before the while loop. We ask them for something, and then we have another statement in here which does the same thing, right? You got to get your input to begin with, and then your while loop bases its expression on that. And then inside we have to update it, so we have to ask for a new piece of data. There are ways to construct your loops that do not have priming reads, and I don't particularly like priming reads because I object to the fact that our read statement is in 2 places. I don't like duplication of code, but in order to get rid of that, you have to make the logic a little bit more obtuse. So a for loop is used to create definite loops. While loops can be used for definite loops. While x equals 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. For loops are all about definite loops. Now honestly, there's nothing you can create with a for loop that you can't create with a while loop and vice versa. But for loops lend themselves to definite loops, to a counter-based loop, or to loop through a series of values, or an array, or a list. Indicates a starting value for the loop control variable. It tests a condition, and then it alters the expression. So let's play with that. Looks like we are on assignment I, lecture I, HI. Why is my Java class on K? I guess because we missed a day last week and then we missed a day to weather. So C#, lecture I. And please create a console app of the type that you normally create. Since we haven't been adding references to our projects, doesn't matter so much which type console app you make, but if we wanted to add references, then it becomes an issue, which type you create. All right, so your classical loop. I'm going to try to minimize asking for input because otherwise every time we run it, we have to answer all those questions, so why not just a simple counting loop? Int lives equals 10, right? Our video, or 3. Our video game starts off, we have 3 lives. And then we're going to play CW, tab, playing the game, oops, lost a life, end quote, in parentheses, semicolon, and then we subtract 1 from lives. Why is it underlining lives? Oh, okay, just because I hadn't used it yet. I forgot my while statement. That's pretty dumb. So above the curly brace, I mean, it would run, but it'd only print playing the game 1 single time. The entire point of looping is to repeat something. So while, parentheses, lives is greater than or equal to 0. Keep running until we run out of lives. And then we can print game over underneath it. Console.write line, parentheses, quote, game over. What if we wanted to print a certain number of asterisks on the screen? We want to print 50 asterisks going across the top. Well, let's do that. We can also use a while loop for that. Since these are definite loops, we could just as easily use for statements for them. But lives may not be a definite loop, because if you kept playing and you got more points, then it would increase the number of lives. And so now the computer can't predict in advance how many lives you're going to have. So that would not be a for loop would not be appropriate here. You can still get it to work. Like I said, there's no loop you can write with for that you can't write with while, and vice versa. But the logic can start to look pretty stupid if you do everything with a for loop. But you can. So let's make a number of asterisks, or just dots. So int dots is equal to 50. I want to print 50 periods on the screen. While, well, we need to declare our loop control variable. So num dot, which dot we are on, is equal to 0. We haven't printed any dots yet. And then while parentheses dots, while the number underscore dot is less than the dots, the specified number, while num underscore dot less than dots. Could call it max dots if I felt like it. And now I'm beginning to think it should have been declared as a constant and made capitals, what the book would do. But I'm going to rename that variable max underscore dots. And then while the number of the dot is less than max underscore dots, we're going to print a dot out. But I'm just going to use right rather than right line. CW, tab, because I want all the lines to be in a row. Right, a single row. And if we use right line, it's going to go to the next line every time we do this. And I don't want 50 dots in a vertical. I want 50 dots horizontally. Now that's going to be an infinite loop because I do not update num dot. So when I run it, it's just going to start, yeah, that's not what I want. So I'm going to close this. We need to update that. Num underscore dot plus plus. Now, especially among C programmers who tend to be really, I don't know, something. I was a C programmer. They'll tend to do things like this. That would work just as well. It actually works just as well. It would print 50 dots. Or not. I don't have my read key at the bottom. Sorry. Console.read key, or read, whatever. Yeah, see, printed my 50 dots. That works just as well. You can update your variable in your test expression. I don't really recommend you update your variable in the test expression. Just make it part of the body. So num underscore dot plus plus. So print a line with 50 dots. That's what our code does. Again, it's a definite loop. Definite loops should usually be expressed as for loops. Just think to yourself, oh, I'm counting down a sequence. I mean, counting up a sequence. I'm making a series of numbers or whatever. Try to make it a for loop. Well, let's do that again. Print a line with 50 plus signs. So int max plus equals 50. But now I'm not going to initialize my variable because the for loop handles the initialization. So for, parentheses, int, the number of the plus, and you know what, I'm just going to rename it I. Int space I equals 0. Single letter variable names are okay, just if it's a simple counter. I equals 0, semicolon. I less than max underscore plus, semicolon. I plus plus in parentheses. And inside the curly braces, we're going to print a plus sign. Oh, I've made a mistake here, which is although I wrote out a row of dots, I never went to the next line. So I'm going to need to put a line of code here after the end of my first block here. So after that while loop, CW tab tab, and it does need to be a right line because I want to go to the next line after I print out all those dots. Right. I'll slow down and do a walkabout in just a second. So inside our for loop, console.write parentheses quote plus sign end quote in parentheses semicolon. Something to notice. This for loop actually has all the same parts as the while loop. We have a loop control variable up at the top, loop control variable LCV. We have an expression here, and we have an update or increment here. We have all three of those things in the while loop. Well, we have the same things in the for loop. We have the initialize a loop control variable. We initialize right there. We have our expression there, and we have our update there. So it's just a shorter syntax, right? We don't have to have a line there and another line there and another line. So what we do in 3 lines in our while loop, we manage with 1 line in for loops. And the syntax is, in my opinion, a lot clearer. Starting at 1, I'm going up to max plus, and I'm going to increment. If I wanted to make it increment by 2 every time rather than 1, I would do I plus equals 2, and so on. Now, just like I did up here, once I'm done printing all those plus signs, I need to skip to the next line, so I'm going to add one more console.write line. I didn't hit CW tab tab, just wasted some time. There we go. Let's make sure it works, and then I'll pause. Yeah, just like that. The book would have shown making max plus a const, so why not? The book would have also made that variable uppercase. I'm not going to bother with that. Too many changes. You don't have to make it const. All right, let's pause.
Because it runs 4 times.
It runs, yeah. There's something dumb about this loop because it runs 4 times. What would I need to do to fix that?
Move the equal sign.
That should just be right. While lives is greater than 0. Because if our lives is equal to 0, we don't want to play the game anymore. So that's the syntax of a while loop. This is called the body of the while loop. Typically, you initialize your variable, you test your variable with an expression, and then you increment it. Now you can have a while loop without a test. It looks just like this. While parentheses true in parentheses, and then do something in here. CW tab tab hi, and it's just going to run forever, which is not what you want, right? But you can put a break statement under certain conditions, right? You can make some variable that you start increasing, or you could ask them if they want to continue, right? So string C for continue equals, really too bad you can't type CR tab tab and have it do that. Console.read line parentheses in parentheses, but we need to tell them what to do. So we're going to put another right line above that, or at least a right. Console.write parentheses quote continue y/n end quote in parentheses. And then we're going to check. If they don't enter a C, if they don't enter a capital Y, if they enter a capital N, we want to bail. So if C equals double quote capital N, end quote in parentheses, then break. We're all done with the loop. Now that's an indefinite loop, right? Because it's going to run often until we decide to finally make it stop. Computer has no idea how many times it advanced. So it would be dumb to implement this as a for loop. Yeah, you could figure out a way to do that, but it'd be dumb. All right, so hi, continue? Yeah, sure. Sure. No, I'm tired of doing it. Ooh, and what did it do there? Oh, it's just waiting for me to hit enter. My final read key at the bottom. I should put a print message that says, you know, press enter to quit, something like that. CW tab, quote, press enter to quit, end quote. Just so it's clear and I don't confuse myself again. And while we're at it, let's add our normal comments down here at the bottom. That curly brace is the end of main. This one is the end of the class. And this one is the end of the namespace. So that's an indefinite loop, and this is our sentinel value. The computer does not know in advance how many times we're going to repeat. Best implemented as a while loop, although you can use a do loop as well, but I wouldn't use a for loop. We show here using a while true with a break. And the only reason I do that is to avoid having a priming read. Yeah, we could have put something up here. We could rewrite this so that it didn't have a break, but there are times when that just seems to make a lot of sense to me. If you disagree, then you don't have to ever use while true. If you do have while true, there better be a return statement or a break to be able to get out of it, though, at some point. If we wanted to implement that as a do while loop, we could write an indefinite loop with a do while, and it would not require a break. I think I'll skip that for now. If you've taken Python as your most recent programming language, you didn't even have do while loops, so I'll have to remind you. Otherwise, you probably know. So after the variable is declared inside the loop, it can be referenced, use good English guys, referenced only for the duration of the loop body. So here, where I created a variable named C, I would not be able to print out the value of C down here. If I did console.writeLine parentheses C, C doesn't exist anymore, right? I can't assign it to anything else, right? It's just a flat out error. That variable no longer exists. Variables only exist for the curly braces within which they are defined. The scope of the variable. The scope of the variable, the scope of this variable is from here to here. If we create a variable above the while loop, then the scope of that variable is from there all the way to the closing brace down here. For a for loop, you can leave parts of the expression empty. If you do that, you still have to put the semicolons. For example, if you declare your variable up above it, like int counter equals 0, you could do this. For semicolon and keep running while, don't type the word while though, counter is less than 10, semicolon, counter plus plus, end parentheses, curly brace, and let's just write out the value of counter. So CW tab counter. Right, and that's still going to print out 10 copies of it. We're just not initializing it here. So you can use a for loop kind of like a while loop. You don't have to initialize in there. You could even take this out if you wanted to. But we could, yeah, as long as we implemented a break in there. But we could take the counter plus plus and cut it out of there and put it there, semicolon, and it works just as well. And I'm not going to demonstrate it, but we could even take that and just make it an if down here and write if not counter less than 10 break. Then it starts to look absolutely absurd. I guess we could cut that out. So if parentheses not counter, not founter, counter less than 10 in parentheses break. There. It's not liking the fact that I expressed it this way. So if counter is greater than or equal to 10, then break. And that'll do the same thing. I could have also fixed it by adding some extra parentheses. Now at this point, by the time you strip it out like this is the same as a while true loop. And that's what I said. You can always implement anything that you implement with a while loop as a for loop and vice versa, just by leaving parts of this out. But it's silly. But you'll see people do things like that just because they feel like they're clever when they do it. You can leave parts of the loop, of the for loop header out, but still need the semicolons as placeholders, or to mark, the empty spots. You can also do more than one thing inside a for loop. Like if we have two variables declared, int x, no, what, we probably have already used x. How about a comma b, semicolon. And then for parentheses a equals 0, comma b equals 10, semicolon. And we're going to keep running while a is less than b, semicolon. And then our update is going to include adding 1 to a every time, comma, max dots, where'd that come from? Comma, and then subtracting 1 from b every time. And then let's just print out a plus b. I'm going to add some extra spaces in here to make it real obvious where the semicolons go. And the rest of them are commas. The things that are not spaced out like that are commas, not semicolons. So this is the initialization expression. That's the comparison. And that's the update. You can make your update as long as you want to. You can chain 20 updates together with commas if you feel like it. And the only thing I wish you could do is do int a is equal to 0, int b is equal to 10. I don't think that'll work. Let's see if that's a syntax error like I think. Yeah, it didn't like that syntax. And if I do this, is that going to work? It actually worked. Okay, that's cool. Set a equal to 0, comma b equal to 10, and then let's just print those two things out. So CW, tab, parentheses, let's put one placeholder, curly brace 0 in curly brace, and then the second one, curly brace 1 in curly brace, end quote, comma, a, comma, b. No, I don't want to continue. And there we go, right? Here's what that for loop is doing. A is going up each time, B is decreasing every time, and when A is no longer less than B, the loop is done. So A 0, B is 10, A keeps incrementing, B keeps decrementing. At a certain point, A is no longer less than B, and so it has exited the loop. So if you feel like it, you can make your... And by the way, the read key is still way down here at the bottom. Sometimes I accidentally start putting code after the read key, and then that confuses me. So here we go. We have a for loop now where we have left parts of the header out. I guess that should have been up there, above that, as shown above. How about I just tack that on? As shown above, comma, and then another comment here. The parts of the loop of the for loop header can be multiple steps separated by commas. Just like that.
What's the last line? How do you get that?
So those are while loops and those are do loops. Do you have a syntax error I need to look at?
Yeah.
All right. So the do loop always enters the loop. The do loop does not have a test at the top. A while loop has a test up at the top, even if it's just while true, right? Tests it, and if this is false, it does not go into the body, just like an if statement. If num dot is less than whatever, if that was not true, it would not do that. Same with a while. Same with a for. Oh, and by the way, if you look at this, it's slightly odd to think about it in these terms, but this happens first. This happens next. What happens next? Not that, right? Then it does the entire body. And only when it's done with the body does it come back up, add one to I, and then start it over again. It checks that again. It's just kind of weird, right? Do these two things, do the body, come back up and do that. But it's because it's nice to be able to put it all in the header. So those are both pretest loops. For and while equals pretest loops. The test goes on above the body. A do loop equals a post-test loop, meaning the test is after the body. People also call it a do while loop. But then you have the word while showing up in both kinds of loops. So if you can just say do loop, then. So say we did this. Do, curly brace, CW, tab, tab, parentheses, quote, we are doing something awesome, end parentheses, end quote, end parentheses, semicolon. Now let's ask them if they wish to continue. String C equals console.readline, parentheses, end parentheses. Whoops, I forgot to put my right statement above that. I did that the last time I wrote this loop. So CW tab tab. Let's just make it right rather than right line. Quote, do it again, question mark, space, end quote, end parentheses, semicolon. That's the body of our loop, and then our expression, our test expression, goes underneath it all. While, parentheses, C not equal to, quote, Y, end quote. Now there's a problem with the code that I wrote here. For one thing, we're not telling them what to type, right? So we need to say do it again, Y/N. Got to tell them what to type. But even so, C here, C right there, is not declared. It needed to be declared above the loop. It's important to remember that just like a while loop, what is being tested here cannot be defined within the loop because it is no longer in scope by the time we get there, because once you get out of the brace in which the variable is declared, it no longer exists. So I'm going to take that word string off of there and put it up here. String C, semicolon. Now to work. Why are you underlined? Alrighty, I already have a variable named C somewhere else. So I'm going to call it R for repeat. String R is equal to console.readline, while R is not equal to Y. So it's a post test because it does all of this stuff and then it does the test. And just like for loops and while loops, you can always do with something with one that you can do with the other. You can always accomplish a do loop with the logic while. You don't have to make it a do loop. However, the syntax can be a lot simpler. That's why Python doesn't even give you a do loop, is because you can emulate it with a while loop. You just have to put a while break at the bottom or something like that. I mean, if something breaks something at the bottom. Because in a way, I'm going to scroll up here for a minute. You see where we did our break here? This is a post-test loop, right? It does the entire body of the loop before it does the test. Although we could move that up to the top. Anyways, so do loops. You declare your loop control variable above it. You have the body of the loop, and then you have your expression. Let's make a do loop that counts, you know, from 5 to 25 by 5s. So int num equals 5, semicolon, and then do, curly brace, CW tab tab, just print out num, in parentheses and semicolon. And then after the closing curly brace, while, keep doing this. Oh, but I didn't update num. I'm going to have to go back and modify num. But keep doing this while, parentheses, num is greater than 0, in parentheses, semicolon. So I forgot to increment num there, or decrement it. This time let's increment it. Let's add 5 to it each time. Num plus equals 5, semicolon. So it'll count from 5 to 25. No, it won't. What am I thinking? While the number is less than or equal to 25. There we go. I said one thing and then wrote another. We initialize it to 5. We print it out. Inside the body, we add 5 to it, and we keep doing that over and over as long as num is less than and equal to 25. I think this is only going to actually print up to 20. It might print 25. If I'd made it less than 25, it would definitely not. All right, my loop is wrong. My post-test loop is not letting me out of it. I got the logic incorrect. What did I do wrong here? I wanted to stop. Yep, there should have been an equal y. Keep repeating as long as it is. Very few languages have the word until here. Do until. And that would work. Do it until r is not equal to y. However, we don't have that, so just make that equal instead. And it printed out 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25. All right. So classical loop, starting loop homework assignments. Let's go take a peek. Sure, I have one made up for the past. I'm not ready for that one yet. I'm going to save that one for Tuesday. I'll post this one though, so if you want to work on it on the weekend, get a head start, you can, because this for loop stuff is going to be pretty easy. So we will post homework 7, whatever number. I'll change the number as appropriate. All right, so homework. Why don't I just stick it in a notepad or at the bottom of the file after a /star. Write a loop. I said write a loop that counts from 20 to 30, but let's specify that it needs to be a while loop. It counts from 20 to 30. All it needs to do is print the numbers. Write a for loop. Oh, come on. Write a for loop that counts from 40 to 100 by tens. Write 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100 by tens. Write a do loop that counts backwards from 95 to 80 by -5. Easy enough. That may take you 5 minutes. If it takes longer, that's okay. If you get stuck, ask me for help. But we've had example of while loops by now. We've had examples of for loops. And we've had an example of a do loop, so hopefully that will not be too hard. There should already be a Dropbox created, so if you're done with this stuff, you can upload to it.